Hello, welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Verley, founder and CEO of Project Purple. And today we have another interview for you coming up with a very special guest. But first, I want to give you a quick update. At the time of this recording, this episode, we are rolling into marathon season. Literally. We've had runners either running, having just finished, or getting ready for races in Berlin, London, Twin Cities, Chicago, and New York City, and other events across the country. We've also had gyms and group fitness teams hosting push-pull events and all sorts of other fundraisers. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who is helping to spread awareness, raise funds, and help us fight for a world without pancreatic cancer, especially this November, as November is Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month. If you'd like to see how you can get involved, visit projectpurple.org and follow us on all social media channels at Project Purple. Without further ado, I welcome our guest on today's podcast, Michael and Missy Skaggs. Welcome to the Project Purple podcast, coming to us all the way from the Detroit area. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Doing good.
Well, so full disclosure, I had it in the calendar to have Michael on, and then we've got Missy here today, which is awesome. I love when Missy, you just made that face. Come on. No, I love when we get spouses on together. We're going to get into your guys' backstory. Michael, you're a survivor. You did something really amazing. That's how we kind of connected. But I think this is really important. And we've had a lot of people that are going through the battle bring on their significant other with them on the podcast. I didn't know ahead of time, but it doesn't change anything. But I think that dynamic is really awesome and cool, because I think sometimes when we've done so many podcasts with survivors with just the one person. And as you guys know, and I'm sure this will come up, when you're fighting cancer, it impacts everyone around you and those closest to you, right? That family unit. So that spouse, even though they're not going through the day-to-day chemotherapy treatments, the pain, everything that's associated with that cancer, they're still experiencing the cancer in this very unique and different way. And I think a lot of times we don't talk about that. And I say we, I'm not just saying Project Purple, but I'm saying the space, right? And the one thing that I will say, and I'm going to hand this over here in a second to Michael and Missy, I've never had, and we've had probably over 100 survivors on the podcast, and no one's ever said, hey, I did it alone. Like, I did this all by myself. I didn't have any help. I was able to figure, I was Superman or Superwoman. Yes, you are Superman or Superwoman because you're beating cancer, but you have a team behind you. And we've talked a lot about that, right? Like having that team and having those supports and how critical those people are in your life. So I just love it when spouses come on and we do these 3 people podcasts, which is awesome, because I think that is really, it really shows what the family goes through and what that person battling goes through. But then also we have this unique ability to show what that caregiver goes through. So it's just awesome. So thank you guys for jumping on here. And as I said before we hit record, our first part of our podcast is always the guest opportunity to kind of share their background, their journey with pancreatic cancer. And as I said before we hit record to Michael and Missy, is you guys can go as far back as you want, and you can say as high level as you want. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael and Missy to share their journey with pancreatic cancer, what brings them here today on the Project Purple podcast.
Before I really go into details about my journey, I just want to reiterate what you were saying about having somebody in this role. I mean, I didn't think twice about when I found out you wanted to do this podcast. I didn't think twice about having her with you. It was just automatically assumed on my part that she's here because you're right. She didn't get diagnosed with cancer, but it was her diagnosis too, because she lived with it it took me months to get my diagnosis, and she went through all that with me. And then once I did get the diagnosis, she was there every step of the way. And that was my strength to get through it. And you're right. They don't go through the chemo. But to me, I think it would be harder for me to watch her go through it than I would rather go through it myself, because I don't know how she did it. And especially with this diagnosis, with this disease, the reality of, living along with this, that is what it is. But at some point, if that's what happens to me, I'll be at peace. She's the one that's got to live on after that. So, and my family, my girls, we have 4 girls, 2 grandkids. They're the ones that are going to have to live on with that even after I'm gone, if that's what happens. So it really does affect them differently, but just as heavily.
It's powerful stuff. So let's talk about the journey and how and when you were diagnosed, and what that's been like to bring us up to speed where you guys are today.
Well, we're both runners. We've been avidly running for the last 10 years or so. And October of 2018, we had just finished the Detroit Marathon. And I did pretty good. I felt great. I was in the shape of my life. And a couple of weeks after that, I went down to visit my dad for his birthday. And I noticed something kind of weird in my stomach. It just didn't feel right, but I just thought it was, an upset stomach. Thought maybe it was something, maybe I pulled something during the race. I didn't really know what was going on. And got into December and started getting more abdominal pain, more upset stomach. I was having a hard time eating. And she kept trying to get me to go to the doctor. And I'll wait. I didn't want to deal with anything at Christmas time. We had a family vacation planned to Mexico in January of 2019. I didn't want it to interfere, anything to interfere with that trip, because we were taking all the girls down. When we got down to Mexico, that it was the second week of January, I was miserable. I really couldn't enjoy the trip. And she made me promise when I get back to start seeing somebody. And I really thought maybe I had a hurt at that point. Visited my primary care doctor in January, and she thought maybe it was an ulcer. So we started that typical algorithm that the GI docs like to lay out when you've got something unknown going on. Well, let's do a scope. So they did an upper endoscopy. We did a lower endoscopy just because it was close to my time for being checked anyways for colorectal diseases. And I was 47 at the time. Those tests came back fine, but I was continuing to have issues with digestion. I was having a lot more abdominal pain. I was starting to get a really weird pain in my back that just didn't go away. And
losing weight.
I started to lose quite a bit of weight. I had CTs, I had nuclear medicine scans done, MRIs, everything was going back normal. And I remember it was probably the first week of April. We're both nurses, and we work. Happened to have one of the ED doctors on our floor one morning, and I told him, this is just not going away. I need to go in. So he told me go over to the ER. I got checked in. I ended up being admitted for a couple of days, and they couldn't find anything. Every test that they did on me looked normal. Like I didn't have the jaundice that a lot of people have. I just had unexplained abdominal pain and losing weight rapidly. They said that I had irritable bowel syndrome that was precipitated by depression, and I had no issues with depression, at least not before I was, losing weight and starting to get sick. But it was a very generic diagnosis. Didn't give me any answers. A couple weeks later, I went back into the ER at University of Michigan, hoping that they could find something there. They didn't really find anything different either. The GI doctor that I had been seeing finally kind of threw up his hand and said, look, we can't find anything. I don't know what's going on. So I just want you to eat some more yogurt and fiber for a couple of months. And you're still having pain, come back and see me. And the pain was unbearable. I mean, I knew at that point I'm dying. There's something wrong. I don't know what's going on. Nobody was giving me any answers. And I happened to have a coworker that knew of a surgeon at the University of Michigan that had helped the neighbor with, I'm not sure what their issue was, but she just said he was a real good surgeon and was very helpful. So I asked my primary care if I could get a referral down to see this surgeon, and finally got down to see him at the beginning of May 2019. And I thought he was going to say the same thing. I'm sorry, I can't find anything. He let me tell my story, and he said, well, I've looked through all your images that you've had done, all your labs. You've looked through everything that I had done over the last 6 months. And, he said, I think there's something there that we need to be concerned with. And in a matter of seconds, he's talking cancer, surgery, chemo. And at that point, I kind of knew that that's what it was, because I'm a nurse. I was able to read through and put enough of the dots together to come up with that on my own. I just couldn't get the doctors, because nobody believed that this healthy guy that is out running marathons and doesn't smoke, he's not a heavy drinker, he's not overweight, the typical risk factors. History. So nobody thought that this could be pancreatic cancer. Well, this surgeon finally got the ball rolling. I went in a couple of days later for an upper endoscopy with a biopsy, and they knew right there in the room. They tested the sample, and it was positive for adenocarcinoma. And I remember laying in that bed after my GI procedure, and when I came to, the surgeon was standing right next to me, and I looked over and I saw my wife at the door, and she was crying. And the doctor, she kind of knelt down next to me. She said, I'm really sorry, but we found cancer. And, as hard as it was to hear, I was relieved. Not because I wanted cancer, but at least I finally had an answer. And I knew what the prospects, what the prognosis is with this disease, but at least it gave us some place to start a fight. And, Michigan medicine did everything they could to get me started on treatment right away. The surgeon was optimistic that he could do surgery, but my oncologist wasn't so optimistic, because the tumor was pretty wrapped around a lot of vascular structures in the pancreas. The surgeon said if I hadn't gotten in when I did, a couple of months it would have gone. But they got me rolling. I started FOLFIRINOX, pretty common treatment. I did that every other week. The first couple of weeks were pretty rough, but by my birthday in 2019, I had lost. That was my lowest weight since I had finished the marathon. I went from about 190 down to 140, 145. And after my third or fourth treatment with FOLFIRINOX, I finally started to gain some weight back. She planned a trip for us, the youngest girls, and her dad went with us to Washington, D.C., which is one of the things I had always wanted to do. One of my bucket list items was to go watch the fireworks in D.C. She made that happen, but at that time, I was not able to walk much further than from the bed to the couch. So anything that we did, we had to take a wheelchair, and they wheeled me to the airport. First couple of days we were down in D.C., they were pushing me around, and I just had enough. I was so frustrated. I felt pretty useless as a human, and I knew I had to take this fight to the next level. So I think it was the third day we were there, I said, I'm not taking this wheelchair. I said, I will walk as far as I can. If I can't make it, I'll come back to the room, but I'm not doing it anymore. I think we ended up walking 5 or 6 miles that day.
Yeah.
It was over 100 degrees in DC.
And he just turned it around from there. That was the day. And it just, everything turned around. It was amazing.
So why, if you look back, I know hindsight's 2020. So up until this point, I mean, it's, you know, that you said, Michael, like, hey, like this was a blessing. I wouldn't say blessing, but it was a relief that you knew what was going on. But then, you know, starting the treatment, and then what happened in DC that just was kind of that tipping point, or not tipping point, but turning point for you, you know, in terms of like, all right, let's do this.
You know, on my birthday is June 21st, and it was just a couple of weeks before that trip to DC. That night, my son-in-law asked me if he could marry my daughter, my oldest daughter. And, you know, I said, you're asking the wrong person, because she's wife. She's the one to decide who she marries. But, you know, I have a very good relationship with them, and I was very touched that, you know, we did that on my birthday. They knew I was sick, so obviously I think they wanted to get that rolling as well. But, you know, that night I knew something had to happen, but I was just so weak and so sick. I mean, chemo was really kicking my butt on top of everything that I've been through. But when we got down to DC, I finally felt, they finally got my pain addressed through, you know, a lot of heavy medication. Because before you get diagnosed, when it's just a random GI problem, they don't want to give you anything, because, you know, a lot of times that can make your problem worse depending on what GI symptoms are. But it's also a common excuse for people to try to get pain medications, because it is so difficult to diagnose and easy to make up things. So I knew what was going on from my healthcare experience, but as a patient, you know, I was suffering. So U of M, they finally got my pain under control, but I was on so many different pain medications, I wanted to get off of them. And when that pain started to break, when I wasn't, you know, taking the pain medications, when I knew, okay, I don't have to keep taking this, I quit that cold turkey too. When we were down there, I had patches that I had to wear. They weren't real happy that I did that, because, you know, they don't want you going through withdrawals. But
yeah, the best to deal with, but
cranky patient.
But I knew I needed to do something different to take control. I had great support with my wife, my family, my kids, friends that stepped up for me. I had the right treatment plan. I knew when I went to Michigan Medicine, I was in the right place from the day we stepped in the facility. Even though, you know, it's a tough prognosis, I knew we were in the right place to get the care that I needed. I had all those things except me. And that's what, you know, I knew I had to put everything I had into it. And it was tough, because I hit my 5K PR in February 2019, before I started getting really sick. And then 2 months later, we ran a race for tax day, and I could barely finish a 5K. And then that was the last time I was able to run until July, when I got back from that trip to DC. I think we went out, I maybe ran a mile and a half, but after 9 rounds of FOLFIRINOX, a few months later, I was able to, the day after my 7th treatment, I think it was, I went out and ran a 10-mile race, a local race. And then after a month, we did a half marathon in Lansing. I haven't been able to get back up to a full marathon yet, but done a few half marathons in that time. It's still my goal, and that's kind of what led me here, Project Proof.
So treatment-wise, I know you used like DC as that turning point, but you come back, you continue the treatment, the FOLFIRINOX, you got the pain under control, you start being more active. And then where are you right now in terms of treatment? Were you ever able to get surgery? You're still doing treatment? What does that look like?
So after the 9 rounds of FOLFIRINOX, I had a couple of weeks off, and then I did 25 rounds of radiation, 5 days a week for 5 weeks, 1 round of chemo every Monday during that 5 weeks. I kept working through that whole time. I would work my shift in the morning and drive myself down to radiation in the afternoon. And that was October, November 2019. I was finally able to have my surgery in December of 2019.
So you had a Whipple?
I had a distal pancreatic.
Distal.
Yep. Took out my spleen, my gallbladder. They did a lot of vascular work. Basically routed most of my insides, blood flow.
So that was December of 2019. 2019. So this was all pre-pandemic then, really. I mean, well, I guess depending.
Yeah.
I'm not going down that. I mean, I know they said it was in the country like in late 19, but no one was testing. But I know for edification purposes, it was really like March of 2020, I think, is when everything kind of came to a screeching halt.
Yep.
So so after the distal, did you go back in for more chemo, more radiation, or was it just kind of surveillance?
Once I was done, the initial plan was for me to have some more treatment after surgery, but I did have some complications, and recovery was a lot worse and a lot longer than we expected. As well as I handled chemo and radiation, I thought surgery would be a snap for me. And I was in the hospital for 9 days. I swirled the drain a couple times while I was in there, but I came home and I thought, we had thought that I had developed pseudocyst, but what it was walled off necrosis at the surgical site. So basically, I had this dead tissue that was pushing up against my stomach. I wasn't able to eat. I gained back almost all the weight that I had lost. By the time I went to surgery, I was back up to 180 pounds. And by the time I think it was probably March of 2020, 4 months after my surgery, I was down to 135 pounds. So I had lost even more weight after surgery because I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. I mean, it was rough, but it was day to day, and I'd say probably May I was able to finally get out and start walking again, and able to pick up running shortly after that.
During COVID, that was like May was right when COVID was ripping through. So that had to be a little weird coming back into.
Yeah, but because I was doing so poorly after my surgery, they wouldn't have started chemo anyway. So
yeah,
by the time I was finally healthy enough to start, they said, "Hey, you're not showing any signs. We're not seeing anything on the CT. We're not seeing anything in your tumor markers that lead us to believe that we didn't get everything." So we just decided we'll just keep watching, and that's really when my surveillance started.
So you've been in surveillance since really May of 2020. So what do? You go for scans every 3-6 months? I know it varies sometimes.
Actually, I backed off on my scans because, a scan is not going to cure it. It may find it, and even if it finds it, it's not always necessarily going to lead to treatment because at that point, you've really got to consider, how you're feeling, what your quality of life. And so I'm doing my scans every year. I had one done. Actually, I had my scans done for my checkup just a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to continue to do them yearly until my 5-year mark. We'll go from there.
So
6.
Yeah, I do get my blood work every 6 months. I deal with the oncologist every 6 months, but we're only doing scans every
year. So I got to ask the question, and this is a loaded question. Knowing that you're both nurses, you're in the medical field. I got a lot of questions. We're going to go down this rabbit hole here in a second. But this is the first question. Do you think, in hindsight's 2020 here, and I'd love to have both of your opinions on this, do you think it was worse or better that you work in the medical field when you got the diagnosis?
I think it was better.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was reading through every result that I got when I was going through that period of trying to get diagnosed. I knew from the first CT what I was reading wasn't right. And that's not the fault of people at the facility that it was done, because they probably have never seen this, because it is. Like I said, I'm healthy. I didn't have any history or any risk factors. So there was nothing for them to think that this what it was. It was what it was. And it wasn't like the images showed, a big scary tumor sticking its tongue out at anybody. It was very hidden. But some of the other signs were there, that some people, may not have understood if they're just reading the wrong report.
The end outcome was definitely better because we had the medical knowledge that we did. Living through it in the moment, knowing everything that you know, I don't know if that's better, because it can definitely play a mental game with you. And just my anxiety and mental health through these last 3-4 years has definitely taken a toll. Just from when he first started to get symptoms, Googling, going down those Google rabbit holes of, I had even said right on, like, I think it could be pancreatic cancer, even before, like, one of your very first CTs. But I mean, obviously we're not doctors. We're not, but
yeah, but how do I say this? I'm probably going to piss a lot of, and I have a lot of doctor friends, so I don't really care. But I think, and you guys know this. Here's how I'll put this. I remember when I went through my own experience with my dad. And that was like the first big medical thing for us. My mom had breast cancer back in 2001, but I was living my life, and it was early stage, and it was just different back in 2001 compared to it is today. And I think I remember going to the hospital a couple times, but then with my dad, I was there for everything. I missed 2 appointments in 3.5 years. And it struck me after the first month, I'm like, these doctors really don't do much. It's really the nurses. Legit, you're both laughing because that's true, right? And I get it. Hey, listen, I'm not here. The doctors, when I say that, okay, now I'm going to get hate mail from everyone, or, whatever. People are going to blow me up for this. I don't really care. But, at the end of the day, I've heard so many stories of nurses noticing things, oncology nurses noticing things, the doctor prescribes XYZ, chemo regimen. And then, while the patient's in the chair, the nurse realizes oh crap, that's not right. That shouldn't happen, right? Because they interact with the patients more so than the doctors. And so, and I'm not trying to badmouth doctors. And this is my second loaded question on this, you guys being in the medical field. And this is a good segue to this is, do you think though, being what you guys experienced, what you guys just shared, what you guys knew, and Michael, you said it hey, I was able to read, to interpret what was on there because that is your job. So you understand what's coming on those reports, but the place, and I'm not trying to put the words back into your mouth probably the right way, but the place where you were probably wasn't the right place to be until you got to Michigan, where that doctor realized hey, this was going on. So what do I mean by that? I'm not trying to badmouth doctors, but what I'm trying to say is, do you guys think the system is broken? Right? The system that we have, potentially because doctors, they have to see 150 patients a day, right? And they literally get 5 to 10 minutes with that patient. They've got to make these quick diagnoses. They've got to see these things, and then they've got to move on to the next patient, right? And part of that's the system, part of it's insurance, part of it's, hey, our society, everyone's so sick, right? You guys are in medical, in the medical field, you see that, right? How many people, come in overweight, they're on medication, they're on tons of pills that, have adverse effects, and the things that they do that they probably don't pay attention to that put them in the ER or whatever may happen. So those doctors have to make those split decisions right away. So in fairness to them, I'm not necessarily bad mouthing them, but like if they don't see something, and that's probably the frustration with pancreatic cancer. Not that I'm walking back here, and I'll let you guys answer the question here, but that, pancreatic cancer is so vague is the other thing, right? So someone coming in with belly ache, belly pain, that doesn't really, could be anything, right? And insurance isn't going to pay for an MRI, or, a clinician's not going to do an endoscopic ultrasound because someone has a belly ache. So my question back to you guys is, do you think it's the system here at fault?
I don't know if I would say fault.
Cracks. Do you think there's definitely cracks in the system?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, we try to do a one size fits all approach, and that's where we run into problems. Like I said, they have an algorithm. They have an algorithm that they've got to go through, and that's partly because of insurance, but the reality is that healthcare is limited in its resources, and we've done a lot over the last several years with breast cancer, being able to get women mammograms when they need them. But there's a lot of focus on that, and it's hard to shift those resources around to other places like pancreatic cancer. And the chances are we may have 200 other people in a doctor's office with the same exact symptoms as I had, and most of them would have just been gas, or maybe an ulcer, or maybe a hernia, but not pancreatic cancer. So it gets thrown to the side. And even like with the tumor marker they can follow, there are so many things that could cause that to be elevated. It's not a screening tool. Mm-hmm. And that's just the scary reality of what pancreatic cancer is. It's so hard to detect it. And if I knew the answer,
there has to be a better way, though.
There does have to be a better way, and it would be nice if we could get something like the breast cancer awareness, but like I said, I think that it gets put to the side a lot. Number one, the age that most people get this is higher age. It's usually, I don't know what the most recent statistics are, but I think it was over 70 people that have led unhealthy lives. And, if we only have so much money to put into research for something, we're going to put that where it pays off the most for our society, the younger people. I don't know the answer to that. I guess to be fair, it is a broken system overall, for sure.
Yeah, maybe I was harsh there. I think the one piece is like, and this is where we come back to, but what you just said, Michael, is that, if we could be where breast cancer is, and so we know statistically breast cancer impacts more people, right? So, and it's more females, which, as I mentioned, my mom's she's 2-time breast cancer survivor. So I am thankful for everything that breast cancer has done, but pancreatic cancer took my dad. Right. And I do feel, we're up against the wall a bit with pancreatic cancer, because it's a 60,000 person disease where breast cancer is like 250,000. Now, if we look at statistically, like where we are, mortality and survivability, treatments, then, there's no argument to make that we shouldn't get more resources, right? Because now pancreatic cancer, isn't very good with mortality, isn't very good with, we have no early detection. But if you look at breast cancer, where they were able to make the strides, and now we're seeing it in colon cancer, right? Like rates are going down because they have early detection. But I think the system does do some good things. It doesn't work for everyone. But this is where I think having these conversations, having hard conversations about it, right, are how we educate, and hopefully that we change things, right? And groups like ours, there's many other groups in this space that, advocate for more funding, advocate for more, support from pharmaceutical companies. from bigger systems, so that the bigger systems, it becomes a trickle down. I know in a lot of states, in Michigan, Michigan's got a huge healthcare system. There's Henry Ford, and so I hope we can get to the place where breast cancer is in this country, for pancreatic cancer, but it is going to have, we're going to have these conversations, right? And amplify these stories like what you guys have gone through. So that's where I think this podcast is so important. I want to ask you guys a couple questions here. Before this, and in hindsight's always 2020. And I know maybe I can relate to this. I was never a runner, became a runner through all of this. You guys know this, and anyone who's listening is a runner. As a runner, your body's pretty well, right? Like, when that, you're both nodding, when that hamstring starts tightening up, or you got that pain in the glute or your back. I mean, Michael, you're my age, so, we're no longer spring chickens, right? Like, it's not like when we were in our 20s when we could just go run and we could eat whatever we want, right? And the calories just burn off. Now in our late 40s, like, we got to be very careful, what we eat, what we do. And those little aches and pains, I think as you get older, you feel them more and more.
Stick around longer.
Yeah. Yeah, the longer we're around, the longer those things stick around, right? So, and again, 2020 in terms of hindsight here, but I know you said this kind of started in, right after that 18 and that January 19 going to Mexico. Could you look back at any time like in the last 10 years and go, yeah, like I had remember when I had that episode with gas, something I ate that didn't agree with me, but then it kind of went away, right? And I just feel as runners, like we know our body, like, right? Like, or maybe it was like, oh man, like I just didn't feel like I could recover after that training run, for like a month. And I didn't know why. Like I didn't do anything different. I just was like tired and sore and, in pain for like a month for no reason.
No, earlier that summer, I did have a couple of run with a running group during the summertime, and one of the runs that I went on, I was just really struggling. I was dehydrated, and my stomach was really bothering me. And I know in years past, I would have like a weird pain in my stomach. I look back now, and like you said, 2020, it was probably pancreatitis, and just too stubborn to really do anything about it. Before, I think it was 2010. That's when I really started getting into running again. I had gotten overweight. I got out of the military back in the early 90s. I gained quite a bit of weight, and I think I may have gotten up to close to 230 pounds. And 2010 is when I decided I want to lose it, because ironically, I wanted to get healthy because I didn't want to go into my 40s and 50s having medical issues that my kids were going to have. I didn't want to be a burden to them. I didn't want to grow up and grow old and have issues that they were always going to have to deal with, dealing with me. So I just wanted to get my health under control. Started running, lost weight, got down, 180, 190. That's where I'm at today. But, running was a big part of that. Once I got that weight under control, I really didn't have that problem with my stomach too much anymore. But that those tumors can be there for years before they're detected. So I may have already had it then. And, I don't know if losing the weight, getting in shape slowed it down, but I really believe that I probably had it before I started trying to take better care of myself. And it's just ironic that when I felt I was in the best shape of my life was when it said, hey, here I am.
Yeah, I think that's a common story that I've heard before, where people decide to like change things up a bit, for whatever reason, and get healthy. And then to your point, it's like, hey, look who's here. Look who joined the party, right? Talk about timing. And I think that's a little bit of the frustrating part, not having early detection, in this space is that, we don't have the ability, we don't have a blood test like prostate cancer. We don't have a mammogram like breast cancer, which can identify, and some women who have, we just came out of October, so I know this. And again, having a mom who's a 2-time survivor, dense breasts, they can do ultrasounds, right? And they can see things. And now with the imaging, with breast exams, they can see, a very, very early stage of breast cancer. So it's frustrating, that with this disease, we just are not there yet. But I have faith and I have hope that, if we keep amplifying and telling these stories, and keep pushing and pushing, that we'll get there. And something that you said early on, I was going to jump in, and I wrote a note here. I think to your point, I think in the past this has always been known as an old person's disease. Not that I don't think that, like, just because you're old doesn't mean it's okay, right? Like, that's one thing. But then I think the other thing, and I don't know, I think I've seen some data where, the number has gone down a little bit, but not significant enough to say, like, to I think what you were saying is, like, it's not like 20-year-olds getting this, right? But there are some 20-year-olds that get pancreatic cancer. It's very uncommon, but it happens. And we've helped many, many, many young people. Sadly, we just lost a gentleman, who was under 30. So, and he battled for, 5 years. But the one thing that I can share with our patient financial aid program that we help patients around the country with, we saw some fascinating data. And that is the majority of the patients that we've helped in the time that we've been in existence, 12 years, fall between 51 and 71. So that to me says that this isn't, again, an old person's disease. Yes, I guess if you want to break down the data, typically it's people, in older ages that are retired, but we are seeing a lot of young people get diagnosed in this disease. And quite frankly, I think 70 is kind of young. I'm not trying to age shame anyone here. But I know many 70-year-olds that, will be at the New York City Marathon this weekend. And I'm sure you guys see it in running, which we're going to talk about in a second. How many old people, this is a run joke, right? When you're running and you see this older person pass you and you're like, oh, I can't let that old person beat me, right? Like, I got to speed up. So how many times have you seen, like, the old lady or the old guy, finish the half marathon, 10K, 5K, and, like, set an age record?
Yep. All the time.
So what has, speaking of running, what has running, getting back to, what you guys love to do, and then doing that post all of this stuff that you've gone through with pancreatic cancer, what's that meant to you guys? And I'd love to hear both thoughts.
It was during, the thick of it, it was really a good distraction for me. So I think it's just been something that's been a constant the entire time. It was something that we were able to do together before. And then it was, even when he wasn't able to run, we had a huge network of running friends that were just really rallied around us, were, supported us through the hard times, came over, helped us do our yard work, brought us meals. Just runners are good people. Not that we didn't have other friends and family. They were ones that they really stepped it up. And just, I was able to, it was a good outlet for me. While he was sick, during his recovery, during COVID, I don't know where my mental health would be if I didn't have that. Probably not really, really bad. So, and it's still something that, now that he can, run with me again, and he's faster than me again. It's, it's just, That's awesome. It's just been a constant for us. And now I love that, how Project Purple is involved with running, and I want to give back somehow, some way. And I love how it's tied with running. So I think it's just a perfect, full circle. If that made any sense.
Michelle, you're speaking to the choir, and I said Michelle, it's Missy. Apologize. Yeah. You're speaking to the choir with that, and I'd love to hear Michael's response, and then I'm going to come back to you because I want to hear what Michael's experience has been with getting back to running and how that's felt for him.
But I had a hard time after surgery, just because of my recovery. It just took me so long to get back into it, and I really struggled for a long time, and I still do. Well, with the surgery I had, I don't want to go into too much detail, but GI issues keep me dehydrated quite a bit. So I honestly believe that running is what helps in my life. It got me healthy before I got sick. If I had been in the same condition that I had been in years prior, I don't think I would have made it. I wouldn't have been able to make surgery. And the doctors, my oncologist and surgeon both said my physical condition is what allowed me to even start chemo and to be able to do the surgery and recover from it. Because, it was just, the tumor was just really, really wrapped up, and they knew, the surgery was going to be very difficult. Treatment was going to be difficult, and it was, but I believe running is what got me in shape to get through that. And I knew that I had to get back to that afterwards. Now, I'm a very competitive person with myself. The only person I want to beat out there is myself from yesterday. So I'm always pushing for PRs when I run. I don't necessarily run for the enjoyment that a lot of people do. Like just to go out and run isn't always fun for me, but the races when I can go out and push myself is what I enjoy the most. And that's what was lacking in the beginning of the pandemic, because races were shut down everywhere. It was hard to meet with groups. So, when we first started, it was just the two of us. And we typically didn't run together much before that, usually because we run our own paces. But since I've been sick, we run, almost exclusively together, except for some races we'll run our own pace. But training runs, we do everything together, and that's really brought us close. And I love, she doesn't always like it. I do push her a little bit sometimes, but it's brought another thing that's brought us closer together. And, I know that I need to continue to keep myself in shape, because there's always that chance that this is going to come knocking. And if and when it does, I want to be ready like I was the last time. I probably will never be as fast as what I was before. I was hoping to do a marathon back in April of this year. I started training in January. I actually ran quite a few miles in January, but it was really cold up here in January and February, and there was one particular run that I went on. I think the temperature was like 5 degrees below zero when I went out, and I had a 18-mile run plan that day. And I think I got about 11 miles in, and I had to call her because I couldn't do it. My hydration packs were completely frozen within a half a mile. So I was out there running without anything. I'm already dehydrated just because I'm always dehydrated.
Mm. I didn't sign up for that. I'm not doing an April marathon in Michigan or training April Marathon in Michigan.
I'm there with you, Missy. Like I don't, I've trained for Boston a couple of times, and that's an April marathon. And I think every year that I was in Boston, like it was bad weather. Like we had, like I think remember one year it was like 32. We got one of those 32-inch northeasters, and I'm like, this sucks. Doing 18 miles on a treadmill in my basement. I'm like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, he did.
I refuse. Yeah, those are miserable.
Never again.
There's a couple of things here, and Missy, I'm going to get back to what you said because you nailed it in terms of what we do here, and from the caregiver's perspective, what you said, like I like beaming inside and on my face. If you watch a video, I guess that's why I decided to do what I did here. I hated running before my dad got diagnosed. And then my dad gets diagnosed with this disease, and I turned to running. It became such a positive thing. And so, that's what this journey has been for us here is, as you guys know, and if you guys have described, as ugly as this thing is called pancreatic cancer, we've tried to bring positivity into the world with running. And I felt at the time, I looked at all the other groups, and some of them were doing running, but no one to the way that I envisioned or we envisioned running here at Project Purple, really giving people the opportunity to honor and remember and celebrate, people that they have been touched with this disease and give them a platform to do that. And clearly it's evolved. I honestly, and I've said this before, I never thought we would do marathons, and now we become kind of the leader in the marathon space for pancreatic cancer. We're in 4 world majors. We're in a bunch of other races. Clearly the pandemic changed a lot, but, things have, quickly gone back to pre-pandemic, which is wild in its own self, right? With all these races, right? So it's just what you said, you hit it right on the head, and why running to us is just so special, because if you're a runner and you're listening, you get it. And if you're not, I'd highly recommend to start running, because that feeling that you get, the clarity, the endorphins, the positivity is just something that, again, you got to go through it to understand it. So I appreciate that. And then Michael, what you said in terms of exercising while going through this. And I said something earlier about, we've had all these survivors, and some things that are common is exercise. So I think being able to do that. Now, you're a runner, so you turn to running. Not everyone's a runner. And so we're not telling everyone, if you're not a runner, to go become a runner if you're going through pancreatic cancer. But maybe that exercise is yoga. Maybe it's Pilates. Maybe it's just stretching. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's just getting up every day and going to the mailbox and back. Or maybe it's doing, weights or Peloton, whatever that is. We've got a guy just had on the podcast. He does a ton of Peloton. He loves riding bikes. But so Peloton is his thing. It is so critical. And eventually we will put some pen to paper and find the data, because I think exercise, and there is some data out there that how important for all cancers, like if you're battling any type of cancer, how important exercise is. So that is just so powerful that you shared that with the audience, because it is truly a benefit. Again, doesn't have to be go out and run marathons, train for half marathons, but getting out and being active and exercising is so critical when going through any cancer journey. I've got 2 questions left here for you, and then we're going to share with our audience where they can connect with you. This question's for both of you guys. I know we've talked about mental health a bit. Missy, I know you mentioned it, from your perspective. Michael, you mentioned it from your perspective. In that same vein, though, let's say someone listening to this podcast has just been diagnosed. And because we have both parties here, the caregiver and the patient, what advice would you give that person from a caregiver perspective for Missy and from the patient's perspective for Michael? And it could be a multitude of things, but I would love to share your thoughts on advice for someone who is just diagnosed listening to this podcast and the caregiver.
So advice for caregivers, accept help. would be the first one. It's difficult for me was accepting help. And everyone always asks, and it's hard to answer that question. What can you do? What can we do to help you? I don't know. But if someone offers something specific, just accept help from other people. Try to carry on as much normalcy as you can. That's where running really came in with me. And working as well. A lot of people were shocked that both Michael and I kept working full time throughout his entire journey, and we work together. We are coworkers. We work on the same team. We're both nurses, but we do IT. So we are each other's like teammates at work. So, as hard as that was, it was still a good, I don't want to say distraction, but also like a good way to keep things more normal. And, I didn't really reach out as much as Michael did to, online forums or, Facebook groups or anything like that. But, I didn't, there came a point where I just had to stop Googling things. I had to stop looking at statistics. I had to just stop looking online things and just say, whatever is going to be is going to be. Our story is our own story. And I just have to look at the statistics anymore.
Powerful. Michael, your advice.
From the very beginning, when somebody finds out, it's very overwhelming. I would tell anybody to allow yourself to feel whatever you need to feel and whatever emotions you need to express, but don't dwell on them because it's not going to do a single thing to make you better, and it can actually harm the time that you may have. I'm very realistic. I try to be hopeful, but at the same time, I know. So I made my peace with where I was at, and like I said, when I found out that I was diagnosed, I was grateful because I knew what it was, and I knew it would give us a plan. Even though I had felt, and I knew my body was dying, I knew what that prognosis meant. I was able to make peace with it and put it aside and focus on getting better. And I likened my new journey in cancer with running a race, with running a marathon. A lot of times, if you've run, there are just some times when you look at the telephone pole up the road and say, I just got to get there and then I can take a break. And that's what this journey was like. I just got to get through this chemo treatment, and then we'll move the telephone pole after that. But I just got to get to this next step. And there were days, many, many days, where it took everything I had just to get out of bed to get to the couch. But I always tried to keep moving a little bit more every day and keep pushing myself. And I do know, like I said, how much weight was put on Missy and the rest of my family with this diagnosis. It wasn't mine alone. There were days, where she had to take care of me while taking care of herself, while taking care of the kids. And, as she expressed, I did get involved, and I am involved in some groups on Facebook. And one of the things that I see too often is the sick person not really appreciating what the other person's going through. It's hard. It really is hard when you've been diagnosed with this to stop your feelings, to set them aside and try to focus on somebody else. But without those people around you supporting you, it's going to be a tough battle. And I'm a pretty independent person. I tried to do as much as I could. I mean, I kept mowing my lawn.
Yeah, you were.
There were days I could barely sit on a lawnmower, but I got it done. And I tried not to put any of that on her any more than possible.
Just very stubborn.
Yeah, I am very stubborn, but you got to keep setting little goals for yourself. You got to appreciate the people that are around you and realize that you're not the only one dealing with this. It may be different for them, but it's not any less impactful in their lives.
It's powerful.
Very humbling for both of us. The help that she needed from outside and the help that I needed from her. Things that at 49 years old, you didn't think you'd have to ask your wife for, but
I think in this is, I appreciate you guys both sharing those thoughts. I look back in my experience and I don't have the answer to this. And this is the question. I think this cancer has this unique effect to really humble people and degrade people. And what do I mean by that? We're both shaking your heads, so maybe understand. But for the audience, so like I remember my dad. He went from like 180 pounds down to like 140. He was embarrassed, right? He was depressed. Michael, you mentioned the GI issues, right? Like that's not something like people, I think it becomes taboo, right? Like, and that's also a symptom, right? Like having massive GI issues is a symptom of pancreatic cancer. We've had a guest on that had, GI issues nonstop for 2 weeks and was embarrassed to go to the hospital or go to their GP and say, hey, like, I can't stop going to the bathroom. So I don't know if this is, and I don't have the answer here, but like, what you guys say is so powerful because, is this a cancer or is this like the other piece of pancreatic cancer where, and I think as society, we don't allow people to, like, Michael, you're saying like you didn't want to rely on other people because you wanted to be strong. You wanted to be able to do everything yourself. But maybe we don't allow people to say, hey, it's okay. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be this persona in a way. Like, it's okay. You can accept the help. There's nothing wrong with accepting help or asking people to mow your lawn or to come over and put new light bulbs in or change the batteries because the fire alarms need to have batteries switched out every 6 months and it's daylight savings time, right? Like it's almost like, and I get where maybe some of the groups, we parade, I have the word superhuman on my shirt, right? So we parade these people that are cancer survivors and we put them on as superheroes. And then everyone underneath that feels that they have to live up to that superhuman persona. So maybe again, I don't have the answer. Maybe that maybe we're doing an injustice to everyone to not being able to accept help and saying it's okay to accept help and not do everything.
Oh, absolutely. That help it's so important. The support.
We could not have gotten through this without all the support we had. It was incredible. Just very humbling.
It's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the GI issues, it was hard for me after surgery because of the changes in my system. Almost a year. The pandemic was pandemic was kind of a blessing for me because it meant that we're very active. Like last night we went to a concert. We do stuff together all the time, and we've gotten back to that since the pandemic was, pretty much past. But for that first year after my surgery, I was afraid to leave the house. I didn't even want to go to dinner because I didn't know when nature would call.
Yeah.
And when it calls, it's you don't have time to deliberate.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult for me to be engaged like that outside of our house. And, I know if we were with friends or anything, I know they would understand, but the population at large, we are quick to judge on that. I do get why a lot of people are afraid to go out. Not a lot of people have had the response that I have. And we don't support those people in the way they need it. And, I understand that not everybody can get out and go do the things that I do, especially after being diagnosed. And they need their safe space too, to be able to, be what they need to do to get through this. And, my experience is I am stubborn, but I have to keep pushing through. But, that's just not the case for everybody. And, I think because of the prognosis, it really does add a lot of extra emotional baggage that, some other cancers might not. I mean, nobody wants to get any kind of cancer, but, there are just some that you hear you've got and you go dark. You go to dark places immediately. And it's hard to get out of that sometimes.
Well, hopefully sharing stories like yours, people listening to it, find these strategies and don't get there, right? And that's what the hope is with podcasts and other groups, raising awareness. And that's where I think, something that you both said about breast cancer, right? Like breast cancer, that thought, that mentality is what it is because of the work they've done and the awareness that they've done. So we just have to continue to amplify, raise the volume, and have these conversations and have these discussions and let people, know that and share these strategies. But also something that you just said, there's nothing in there that says that you can't be part of that 11%, right? Like the 11% is the survival rate. So like we have this really weird ability in this space to say, okay, you have pancreatic cancer. Yes, it's not easy. It's awful. But you could be part of that 11%. You could be the success, right? And that's where I think we also fail. I mentioned before, with the mental health aspect or the acceptance of help. But I think we also fail in this space of making that more apparent to everyone that they can be in that group. Right. And I think that, Missy, you mentioned, the internet being very dark. I think that's part of the problem, and I get that people, go through a traumatic experience and want to share their experience. And sometimes those experiences are very dark. And I know a lot of the pages can become very dark and very negative. But I think that's part of the problem, is people on the internet, and a lot of that stuff's not controlled. It's not policed. It's not even vetted sometimes. Right. And clearly we've seen over the last couple of years, the disinformation. I think we were supposed to have a disinformation czar, but that never materialized. So, maybe one day we'll have a disinformation czar for cancer, and maybe that a lot of that negativity will be eliminated, or the stories that are, fabricated, on certain cancer journeys and stuff like that. My last question here to both you guys, and I'd love to hear both response as well. And this is a loaded question. There's no right or wrong to this. But given your experience that you guys shared with us and what you guys have gone through, how do you define pancreatic cancer? What's your definition?
In one word, it's hell. It's it is a loaded question.
Yes.
There's no right or wrong. So if that's how you sum it up, Michael, hell, we roll with it. Missy, do you want to add to that?
I mean, it's something that you see a celebrity gets once or twice a year, but you rarely know anybody that personally that has been affected by it. So it's like, is that a real thing? And certainly pancreatic cancer is one of those things that eliminates the argument that money fixes everything, because obviously a lot of people with a lot of money get this, and I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It's about your protection, but I mean, pancreatic cancer.
I mean, it's life changing for whoever gets it, anyone who is around them, loves them. I mean, it's like you said, it's so surreal. Like when he was first diagnosed, it just did not even feel like reality. Like, who that I know would get pancreatic cancer? Not my husband, but now that we're on the other side of it, I mean, it's definitely changed. It's definitely changed who we are, and I mean, it was hell going through it. You're right, but I mean, we came out on the other side, so far.
It's taken me some time to, I've known that I need to give back somehow, because I am very fortunate, not just to survive, but to thrive. And to be able to get back to where I was at, close to it. But along with that, I do fight that survivor's guilt. And I've asked why me many times, but not why me, why did I get cancer? I ask why me, why am I still here? I never thought that getting diagnosed with this was, God's vengeance or karma or anything else. It is. I mean, cancer is part of being human, and that was one that hit me. So I never felt sorry for myself, but I do struggle with that survivor's guilt. And it's taken me some time to really want to be able to get to a point where I can, we've talked about this. We've done interviews. I did a commercial for Michigan Medicine last year, because I do want my story to inspire hope. But right alongside that is that constant nag of, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Yeah. I kind of lay in the shadows a little bit, because it's not that I mind people knowing my story. I guess I'm afraid to really go forward with this, because what if I don't make it? And people look to me for hope, and they say, well, he didn't get it. So I do fight with that. Even though I know every day that goes by that you don't see it is that much better for me long term. But there's always that chance. It's always in the back of my head. But I know that because I have been blessed with such a good outcome, I need to do something to get back. Yeah. Again, that's where Project Purple really lines up with a lot of what we do in our lives.
Well, I want to thank you guys for sharing that, and I'll leave you with this though. Just live.
That's right.
You're here, and like I said before, just a couple minutes ago, there's nothing. I didn't see anything that says you're not part of that 11, and there's nothing in writing. So you're part of that club, man, and you just continue to live. Tomorrow's not guaranteed, but we have today, right? I'm sure you've heard that, not to be corny, but you're living and you're inspiring. So I just want to thank you guys for opening up and sharing your journey with us. If our audience listening at home, maybe there's someone watching or listening that may just be diagnosed, find some correlation in what they've gone through and what they're facing. If they wanted to connect or reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
I am on Facebook, Michael Skaggs. I'm sure there are a few out there, but you find my picture on there. Anybody that wants to reach out to me can reach out to me at my email address, mchlskggs 1971@gmail.com.
Awesome. Missy and Michael, thank you for being a guest on the Project Purple podcast. It's been an honor to share your journey with pancreatic cancer.
It's our honor to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like what you hear or what you watched on YouTube, feel free to share this episode, follow us on YouTube, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, please be safe. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast.